It's hard to believe that we've been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
So many great conversations over the years about so many great movies. All that said, producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes.
Becoming a Next Reel member gives you access to all sorts of additional and exclusive content. Plus, you're helping us keep the lights on. Just head to thenextreel.com/membership, where you can learn more about becoming a member, which costs a measly $5 a month, practically the same as one fancy coffee drink. And you get so much more.
Every month, we record a bonus episode exclusively for members. Those episodes cover movies from whatever series we're covering at the moment, or add to previous series.
Some movies we've covered that only members get to hear us discuss include The Blues Brothers,
The Russia House,
Naked Lunch,
Independence Day,
The Hot Rock,
and Relic, the better one. Plus, members get to vote on what we're going to discuss for those episodes.
We also record additional pre- and post-show content in regular episodes that only members get to hear.
Like conversations about similarly themed movies.
And answering listener questions from our live member chat.
Speaking of our live member chat, we record almost all of our episodes in Discord, where members can chat right along with us live.
Members get access to other members-only channels in our Discord community as well. On top of all that, members get all episodes a full week earlier than everyone else in a private Next Reel feed just for them that includes all the shows in the Next Reel family. The Next Reel, the Film Board,
movies we like, Sitting in the Dark, and more new projects on the way.
To top it all off, members don't have to listen to ads. We've already eliminated those annoying, dynamically inserted ads that, let's face it, we all hated.
We are listening to you.
We love podcasting for a living, and those ads help to pay the bills. Now, we're counting on you, dear listener.
We promise we aren't going back to those terrible, dynamically inserted ads that don't relate to us at all. All we ask is that you consider supporting the Next Reel family of podcasts with a membership.
Again, it's $5 per month or $55 per year. Just head to thenextreel.com/membership.
thenextreel.com/membership. Get your access to early, ad-free episodes with bonus content, member bonus episodes, and access to member channels and live streams in Discord by signing up today. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
The Woman in Black is over. Even the most rational mind can play tricks in the dark.
During afternoon tea, there's a shift in the air, a bone-trembling chill that tells you she's there. There are those who believe the whole town is cursed, but the house in the marsh is by far the worst. What she wants is unknown, but she always comes back. The specter of darkness. The woman in black.
The Woman in Black, Andy. Oh, she's so scary.
She's here to provide the ghostly chills, right?
Such ghostly chills. That's exactly why she's here. And this is also, I think, was this a turning point movie for Danny Ratz, as I call him? Daniel Radcliffe? Danny Ratz? That's another shirt we should do, is like mafia nicknames for famous actors who don't have mafia nicknames.
That is pretty funny. But to your point, I think that there's an interesting sense of him as an actor breaking free of the Harry Potter mold that he had been doing. This was really the first thing. I mean, he did December Boys in the middle of his run of all the Harry Potter films, but this is his first film post Harry Potter. And albeit he's got the very end of Deathly Hallows Part 2 where he's playing an adult. But this one is like he's actually playing an adult for real,
Yes.
the real Radcliffe. And so I remember when this did come out that there was quite a bit of praise for him that, oh, look, he's working to break free of the Harry Potter mold, and he's doing a pretty good job with it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can already tell he's making interesting choices. Like this feels interesting, even though it takes place in a universe that sort of is reminiscent of, the wizarding world of Harry Potter. And it's a movie that also ends in a white train station. Which I think was really funny. Where's Dumbledore?
That's funny.
Anyway, but it is just a showcase of this guy who started making some fascinating choices that really allowed him to kind of shake the yoke of Harry Potter in a really positive and interesting way, like compelling way. And so this was it. It takes a bit to adjust to him playing an adult attorney in this movie. He still looks very young. He's got the sort of Leonardo DiCaprio curse. But eventually I got there, and I felt like he totally fit the mold for me. I thought he ended up being aces in this movie. I thought he was interesting to watch.
I think that he's bringing a youthful sense to the character that works well. He's a very young solicitor in the UK, and he's, this story takes place in generally 1910. At the very beginning during the credits, we're seeing stuff that took place a few years beforehand in 1906 when his wife died in childbirth. And so we're kind of getting a sense of kind of his grief as a young man. And I think that was an interesting thing for him to play. I mean, he certainly had his share of grief that he had to deal with over the course of Harry Potter. I mean, his parents died at the hands of Voldemort.
They never let you forget it.
Yeah, right. So he's pretty much carrying that grief through that entire thing. But here it's like a different grief. It's like I did feel like it's that grief that you feel when you're on your own and you have a wife and suddenly that person is taken from you. And it felt like this is a person who is on his own trying to figure out how to navigate the sadness that is kind of so pervasive in his life. And that's a challenge for him. And I think that he brings a lot to that. And I actually bought him as a parent too, like a young parent. Like I know sometimes you look at these kid actors or child performers, and then suddenly it's like they're playing a person who has kids, and you're like, really? But like he worked really well in that mold. I thought he fit really nicely in that.
Yeah, I mean, I thought so too. It was exactly fine. He wasn't bad. It did what it needed to do for the movie's reputation. I think probably people saw it out of curiosity, in addition to being interested in ghost stories, like curiosity as to here's this incredibly well-known global name, and doing something that isn't tied to Harry Potter is an act of curiosity. And so, yeah, I thought it was great. What'd you think of the movie overall? You had seen this one before, right?
I have not. This was first time for me.
Oh, you had not. This was the first time. Okay. Give me a sense of your take on this as a ghost story. How does it work for you?
I mean, I think it works well as a ghost story. I think there's definitely a conversation to be had in a bit about kind of the source material of this and its place in kind of English culture and everything. But I think as far as a ghost story, a lot of ghost stories deal with something like this, where there is something tragic had happened years beforehand in this particular place. And whoever it is who's here now, whether it's a house or a nearby marsh or whatever it is kind of like they are now in a situation where they're dealing with this malevolent spirit that has kind of lingered and is now causing issues. And now this person is like, well, now I've got to help figure out what the problems are and see if we can help that whatever that spirit come to terms with what happened and find peace. And that's generally the journey a lot of people in some of these ghost stories go through. What happened? How can I help them? And will that give them peace?
Yeah, we've got to help them move on, right? Help the unsettled undead, the unsettled dead move on.
And to that end, I think it works. You could argue, kind of like Sinister, they fall a little heavily on some of the tropes and also on trying to create the jump scares and really amping that up here. That's a big part of this. That being said, James Watkins, who directed this, this is the only thing of his I've seen. He hasn't done a lot of things, but I do think that there's a level of creating the mood and the tone throughout this film that works quite well. But I do think there's a little much of writing in the tropes and the jump scares.
Andy, I stand relieved because of that comment. I thought I was crazy. The movie's vibe is awesome. I love the setting, the set pieces. I love the house. I love the idea that it's on this old road where the tide washes the road out twice a day. Like that ticking clock kind of entrapment is exceptional. And the house and the fetishization of candles, like lighting the candles, like making that feel real to me. Like that felt like, okay, it's not just mysterious candles that never burn out. This is a guy who has to keep the candles lit or he can't see, and made it a real sort of narrative point in many of the big set pieces. So the mood is awesome, using light and dark, using all the house is great. And it's also a lot of house. I felt like it became such a repetitive act of opening doors and building to jump scares that I got a little bit bored of that part of it. I felt like this was a movie that did a lot of setup without enough sort of major horror or ghosty events to actually tell me to actually move the story forward. I got that the crowds people were upset. There were a couple of sequences. The fire I thought was a great and interesting sequence when he's in the basement with the woman in black in the corner and the girl who kills herself with the flame. I thought that was extraordinary and horrific. I like the grief of the townspeople and the mood there. And every time Danny Ratz is in the house, I found myself, like, by the end, it became a little bit tedious.
It's tedious, but I think it still is fun and effective. And that's I think the line that I walked with this film. It's kind of like Sinister on my more recent watch of it. It's like I acknowledge that it's doing all of these things, but I'm still able to kind of have fun and just go along for the ride. Like, I think they're pushing a few too many buttons, but it's like they still create an effective character in the woman in black. Like, she was creepy when she popped up and everything, and there were some great creepy moments. As we were approaching this, I decided that I didn't read the book. I was curious to check it out, but I did watch the previous version of it that was made for British television in 1989. And then I also just kind of checked out the synopsis of the book. The book, it sounds like it's interesting, and I think it is worth just kind of comparing how different each of the versions are. The book actually starts with Arthur much later in his life. He's at home with his wife and his 4 stepkids, and they're sharing ghost stories. Everyone asks him to tell one, and he gets mad and leaves the room, and then he decides, I'm going to just write it all down, and he recounts this story. So it's one of those bookended stories as we're kind of getting all of this.
Epistolary, yeah.
There, the story is largely the same. He meets Samuel on the train. We get the whole thing with the woman in black and how she appears, and when somebody sees her, a kid dies and all of that sort of stuff. It doesn't go so far as to him trying to figure out how to heal her and all of this sort of stuff. This doesn't happen in the book or in the 1989 movie. He just basically tries to finally get away from her And that's essentially what happens. He finally gets away from the house in the book. And then at the end of in the book, he comes back home to his wife, has a kid, puts it all behind him. And then while he's at a fair, the woman in black shows up. He sees her step in front of the carriage that they're on, and he and his wife and child are killed. And so that's his ghost story there. In the 1989 version, which for me actually was creepier than the Radcliffe version, and I think it's just because it does actually rely on tone and doesn't necessarily push with the jump scares and everything, but you get a little bit more of the straight story of him arriving and going to the house and everything. What's interesting in that film, that one takes place in 1925, not 1910. And in order to get power in the house, there's power in the house, he doesn't have to do candles, but he has to go to this shed next door, and it's this hand-cranked generator that he has to spin and get it going fast enough to actually pump the energy into the house so that he gets lights. And it allows for a few really great moments with that whole thing, which was fun. But that one does follow a little closer to the book, I suppose. He finally gets away from the house. He ends up seeing the woman in black comes to see him in his hotel room, and he ends up with this huge fever and finally gets taken home. And then he's out with his family, his wife and his 2 kids. And he sees the woman in black standing in the middle of a lake. And then she walks toward him, and then a huge tree branch crashes off a tree. The whole thing like collapses onto their boat and kills all of them.
Oh dear.
Yeah, it was, I really enjoyed the 1989 version. It was a lot of fun. But it's interesting to see like what they did to amp this one up, as far as like this one, they added the whole motivation. We've got to figure out what Jeanette wants. She wants her kid.
Did you find that part compelling? Because that actually is a thing that worked for me. Like, I know it's a trope. I know it's a ghost story thing. And I felt like the way they did it, the rescue of the boy's body out of the marsh, I thought was really great and horrible. And that he did the work of finding the body and doing enough of the ceremony. None of that felt overwrought to me by that point in the movie. That was okay.
I like the sequence. Like, it's great the way it plays out, like having to go under the muck, that just kind of dark brown muck in the marsh to find the car and pull the body out. That was fun. Like, that was actually super creepy. It made for a scene that worked quite well. I liked the way that it all played out. And then cracking her grave open and putting his body with hers. Like, it made for an interesting sequence. Yeah, right. They add a lot more with this. Like, we have those 3 girls at the open that we get to see, like they're playing in their attic room, and then suddenly it's like they're possessed and they decide they're just going to go jump out the window and kill themselves. Toward the end, we have the girl whose parents have locked her away in the cellar to keep her away from the woman in black, but then the house catches on fire. You already talked about how he goes down there and sees her, the woman in black, down there, kind of convincing this girl to pour gas or fuel on herself so that she also burns up. Some of that stuff is where I was frustrated with some of the changes here. It felt like they were trying to make her more active in the way that everything was happening with the kids' deaths and everything. And I wasn't so sure that...
The woman in black, you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Weirdly, coming right after Sinister, it just made me kind of laugh as I was watching this. I'm like, my God, she's just the Bagul.
Yeah.
She's
the Bagul.
She's convincing these kids to do these things, but she's doing nothing. She just stands there the whole time.
I mean, she's not doing nothing, right? Aren't we supposed to believe that she has this sort of paranormal control over the kids?
Well, right. And that's just like the Bagul. They all have some sort of control, but literally all they do as characters is stand there.
That's all they do. And sometimes they rush at you with their mouth open. There's a lot of rushing.
There is a lot of that, yes. There was actually, in the 1989 TV version, there was a really creepy moment where she comes at him in the hotel room that I just wasn't expecting, and that did give me shivers. It was pretty fun to see.
Okay.
But you know, I don't know, it's fun. But I can definitely tell it's this period in telling ghost stories where they are really relying on, they're trying to pump the jump scares into the film. And I think it's because largely for appealing to younger audiences, or also the filmmaker is just not knowing how to craft a ghost story that allows for the building dread to just kind of come in and overwhelm them, because they just punch you so much with the jump scares that, you know, it kind of loses its steam a little bit. But I mean, they're still effective and fun. Like when he's looking out the window and suddenly she's like right behind him. Like there are still some fun moments in this.
Some of those were great and super effective. I think for me, it was just it was the presence of so many hallway like shots and doors that were staring at a door that may or may not be open this time. And I just thought that's like, it's playing itself, like it's calling its shots too often. And it ends up kind of numbing me to the suspense a little bit, that by the time we have so many jump scares toward the end, by the time we get to her final reckoning, I'm no longer in it to be scared. And I kind of feel like that's the point of these movies, is like to have me on the edge of my seat. But this leads to my final, I think maybe complaint, but I don't know. I am not settled on how the movie ends. They make a big deal about how she needs to be resolved, how she needs her son back. Are we to get that Radcliffe, Danny Ratz, was wrong in his theory that she needed to be resolved by the way the movie ends, or that she has just decided, I'm not going to give up my pettiness? Like, who are we supposed to learn about in the way the movie ends?
That was an interesting change that isn't apparently in the book. Well, it's definitely not in the book or the 89 film, where they go through the effort of reuniting her with her son. Like that never happens. And she continues haunting him all the way through the end in both cases.
Okay, that's interesting.
Not necessarily even at the Eel Marsh House anymore, right? Like she's followed him wherever he happens to be in London or wherever else in England when she kills him. And that's, I think, an interesting element that certainly taps into the whole line of ghost stories where we talked about this with Sinister, where it's not the house that's haunted, it's the person. It's now the person, or that spirit is so malevolent that they're going to do whatever, and if that means following you, they'll do it. And that's, I think, a very creepy element that you have here that it does continue from the book, but there is this element of the ghost coming back after we think he's done everything that he should have done in order to give her peace, only to find that it doesn't. And there have been examples, none are coming to mind at the moment, but where they've gone through the process of trying to give the ghost peace, only to find out the ghost is still there. Oh crap, we did the wrong thing. That wasn't the thing that we needed to do. And then they have to figure out this is the right thing to help the ghost actually get peace. That's been maybe how they had gone before. This one, I don't know. It was an odd switch to the ending that I guess just made the ghost more malevolent. Like either that, or it's just one of these things like, how do you ever really know as a living person what a ghost is after? Like, and for maybe it's just like the thing, like his presumption that he's right. Is that what we're going after? That like, why should that be the thing? You know, I don't know. I guess there are a few ways you can look at it.
Well, for sure. And I guess I came at it probably way too Doyleist in this watch, because knowing that there's another movie after it, as soon as she shows up on the platform and Danny Ratz and Child are reunited with Mummy and killed, I thought, oh, they wanted the door open for another movie if this one does well. And that's just super cynical. So it actually is a relief to me that this is a continuation from the book, that she's not resolved in the book. She is an ongoing concern as the book ends. Like, that's fine. That is relief. And it makes the ending, the downer of an ending, that he and his, I guess it's arguable. Is this a better ending that he and his kid are dead and actually are reunited with their mother? that's an interesting take on the resolution of grief in horror movies that, lean in, folks. If you just end it all, look at the reward. Everything's clean now and you're reunited with your dead wife. Maybe there's a message in there that I don't get yet, but it makes it more interesting, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely an element in there about how they chose to find this resolution for him with his grief. Like, he's finally through it and everything. That being said, I was curious about the decision to do that because we also have all of the ghost children show up and they stare at Samuel across the train yard with the woman in black, and he sees all of the ghosts there and he's like, oh crap. And he acknowledges, like, he knows that that's probably where Arthur and his kid are now. But the fact that they give Arthur essentially the happy ending by allowing him to end up with his wife, I thought was, I was like, that seems like a studio choice. It seems like it would have been a bolder choice, maybe to have his wife there. And as they go to her, suddenly the woman in black takes them. Because, I mean, all the other kids are with the woman in black. Why doesn't she get to keep them too?
Well, and the woman in black, like when we look at the woman in black, when he's in the dream state, she's not disfigured. She's just veiled, right? Like when he's in the death state, everything seems to be normal and cleaned up. It's only when piercing the veil of death that they appear horror creatures. And maybe that's it. Like maybe her work is done. They're dead. And so she doesn't care anymore.
But why do all the other children like linger around with her and everything? Like,
I don't know. It's a real Pied Piper vibe.
Because he sees, there is a point when I lose track of like all the trips around the house, but there's a point where he's upstairs and he's looking out the window and he sees the kid out there, right? Like climbing through the mud or something. And so it's like, I don't know, are they there because they're just reliving their moments? But it's like when she's at the train station, they're all with her. So I guess
they're all with her.
That's a thing. Like, there's not a clear sense as to how all of that's handled. And it's a ghost story. It's, it's all loosey-goosey anyway. It's not like they need any well-defined rules, but it does just seem like they're all generally hanging out with the woman in black now. So,
which, for me, I think that was fine. I think I still go back to this idea that the movie ends on already on a downer, that the woman in black is unsated, right? She's still not satisfied and she's petty. And they leave Danny Ratz and Child on an up note. And I think that's my problem. That's a cognitive dissonance that I have yet to resolve. I almost think it would have been more interesting had the woman in black not shown up and they die and end up reunited as an accident. Like, it's just like, oops, we tripped in front of a train and now we're dead, but at least we get mom, but the woman in black is gone too. Or they don't end up dead and have to, realize that their life is now plagued by the woman in death and the woman in black, and they'll always be looking over their shoulder, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to go dark, let's go ahead and go dark.
Well, that's why I found the other versions to be kind of interesting, because he really feels like he's free. He's back in London. He's hanging with his wife and kids, and they're off doing things. And then the woman in black shows up later. Like that, I don't know. There was something interesting about that I thought worked quite well. Here, he's doing all of this because he knows his son is on the way up with his nanny, and he's trying to placate the woman in black before
ticking clock,
right, before she can kill his kid. And that's the whole race. Would it have worked better if he got back to London and then got killed? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. Because then you get more into what into the I mean, as long as you're going to have a mechanic, then you get more into the mechanic of who's being haunted. And it's not the town being haunted, because with him dying and having the woman in black appear to him at the train station, is that a message that he can't get out, or that she's following him, or that she's haunting the town and he's subject to it as long as he's in the town? But I kind of like the idea of him getting out of the town and having her follow him. Like, she's always present now that he is engaged with her.
This is kind of like Well, it's like any ghost story. It's like I was going to say sinister, but any of these stories where you have very particular mechanics that go into this whole thing. And the whole story of the Woman in Black is she's largely not around this town of Crith and Gifford, where we're at for the bulk of the film. But if somebody sees her, whoever it may be, a child is going to die. That's essentially the mechanic of the film. Why is this the plan that the Woman in Black has put forth? Why does she require somebody to see her in order to then go take a kid? Like, it's not ever fully explained. I mean, we kind of get this sense of her grief. You know, there is this story. We find out her name is Jeanette Humphrey. She was the sister of Alice Drablow, who owned this house and who just died. And that's the whole reason that Arthur is here, to kind of go through her belongings and paperwork and everything. Jeanette had a kid. Her sister and her husband took the kid away and then essentially like put her in a mental institution for like a year because they didn't think that she should have a kid, not being married at all. And so then she comes back, hangs herself in the room in the whole, like, you know, I want my kid sort of fit. And her kid dies. That was the first thing. You know, her kid ends up crashing in a carriage into the marsh and sinking and dying. And so she hangs herself, and hence all of this. But then why go through this process?
Well, and don't forget, though, the guilt is that the parents, the adopted parents, were also in that carriage, and they saved themselves, and the kid died, right? They apparently got out. And that's why she was so pissed.
Yeah, and the kid died.
Yeah.
Little different in the other versions, but yeah, that's essentially the story. So then why this mechanic?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't make sense of it. Yeah, I mean, she's just haunting the children of the living because of her pettiness. That's what we're to get out of it. No one deserves a child if I can't have a child. Is that the message?
I guess that's what they're doing. But then why does somebody have to see her first?
Yeah. I'm not comfortable not understanding that. And sometimes I'm comfortable not understanding things. This is one of those where it's like, it just doesn't make sense. I'm thinking maybe too hard about it.
Well, and I guess maybe we're thinking too hard about it, but why in this town of other people, other adults, plenty of kids, they're obviously doing their best to shy away from anything having to do with this woman and making sure they can do whatever to not see her, essentially. But I don't know how they can prevent that. We do find out that what's his role? Like the town's solicitor, I guess, who's the one who's been in charge of the estate. Otherwise, when Arthur comes to see him, he refuses to help and says you should just leave and all of this sort of stuff.
Here's a wee envelope of paperwork to satisfy your needs.
Yeah, now go away.
Please be on your way.
Meanwhile, we find out that he has locked his daughter in the basement. This is the one that burns up later because he is so afraid of the Woman in Black getting her. But I mean, as people who live in this community, and this has been happening for decades, I don't know. It just seems like they would have some sense that she can work around basements and things like that. Like that's where I run into some stumbling blocks with kind of the mechanics of this particular ghost.
Yeah. And you know, all of that is to say, like, it sounds like I feel like maybe it sounds like we're being hypercritical on it. And I for my part, I enjoyed my time with this movie. Like, I really felt like the mood was really great and cool. And I think Danny Ratz does a great job kind of headlining this thing. And Kieran Hines is always a treat to see in the movie. And I love that he's the only guy with a car. Like, there's some good stuff going on in this movie, the setting, the vibe, everything. And so I think the reason it's easy to point out this mechanic is because it stands out as a thing that feels unfinished to me in the story. And I don't know if that, having never read the book, I don't know if that's like, it sounds like there are some choices they made in this adaptation from the book that may have hurt the mechanic of the ghost rather than helped it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's an odd mechanic in however you look at it. I mean, it certainly is the mechanic in all of the other versions as well. All of that aside, I mean, there are interesting elements, and Kieran Hines, you mentioned, he's the rich landowner who also lives in town. He befriends Arthur on the train as Sam Daly. And we do find out that he and his wife, Janet McTeer plays his wife Elizabeth, they also had a kid who also died. But I did think, and this was something I enjoyed in this version, that he has kind of taken this mindset of denial and kind of like, oh, these townspeople are crazy.
Yeah, they're all rubes. They don't understand. Yeah.
Yeah, they're such little people. Like, I've got this car, I'm so smart. And he's kind of put himself into this place of total denial of what has happened, and he likely could have given Arthur some warnings. And that was an interesting element of the story that I liked with the way that Sam and his interactions, and particularly his wife. I always liked Janet McTeer. That was an interesting element of it, the way that played. What did you think of that?
I agree. I think it's really interesting, and it is a nice way to separate them as a couple, also having experienced the same loss, and it makes the rest of the townspeople, lean in toward kind of groupthink or cultish behavior, right? The fact that they gather on the street to try and get the guy out. They're much angrier than Kieran Hines and wife. Like it feels like they're dealing with at a different level. And I think it's nice to see how clearly and kind of effortlessly separated they can make our kind of enabling character of Kieran Hines without making him look like, just another townsperson. I thought it was smart writing for that character. It was just generally smart writing for the character.
Yeah. It was nice.
Yeah.
You mentioned the causeway, and I completely agree. One of the most fascinating film locations that I have seen in recent years. It is a real causeway on the island out there is the Osea Island. The causeway is this road that goes through this marsh, and you have to make sure you're timing it with the tides, because you can very easily get caught if the tide comes in and you're on it, and you're not far enough along. Likewise, it's a very, very foggy area, and I think that whole thing lent such a unique look to this whole thing. It was so haunting and foreboding. Susan Hill wrote the original book. I don't know if she patterned it off of this particular one that they filmed on, but it's essentially it. And they filmed all of the films using this causeway. So clearly it was a location that worked really well for all of these.
It's a great example of things that, when you talk about things that I stop and think about versus things that I don't. I did note how, I wondered how it works when the tide comes in and water covers this road. How does the road remain drivable when the area on either side of the road is just this deep marsh of mud and bog? What is it about the windiness of this road that is stone or something that doesn't turn to muck? It's fascinating to me that this, and I know these places exist. I get it. I find myself really lingering on how fascinating this location is.
I don't know what goes into actually making a causeway like this.
Yeah.
That is what's really interesting, is I don't know if I have a clear understanding myself, but it's interesting. Did they have to, was it just, assuming it's just a lot of construction in dumping a lot of materials in the marsh and then firming it up with enough material to kind of strengthen it so that it actually stays and doesn't get washed away. But
it's fascinating.
Yeah, really, really, really interesting. Very creepy.
Yeah.
This was a Hammer film. Did you notice that? I think it's actually the first time we've talked about any Hammer film on our show.
I almost opened with that. I almost opened with a Hammer Time joke. I did. Yes, it's a Hammer film, a new Hammer film. You're not accustomed to talking about Hammer films that aren't, old exploitative.
Yeah, the whole Hammer had its successes in the 60s and then into the 70s, fading away by their last production was 1979. It was a remake of The Lady Vanishes, Hitchcock's film, with Elliot Gould and Sybil Shepherd. that was their last film, and the brand name was resurrected in 2007, and they had done a few things leading up to this one. But I know that since then it's gone through a lot of ups and downs and has been struggling to find success. But it has been releasing, I think since 2007, it's released 9 films. Most recent one was Dr. Jekyll in 2013, that one with Eddie Izzard for 2023.
Yes, I don't know that it did very well.
I don't know if it did, but The Lodge, actually,
Yeah,
that was a film that was I brought up as one of my list picks, and that was a trailer rewind film.
yeah, for sure. Jane Goldman wrote this with Watkins. Interesting that Jane Goldman I happen to like other Jane Goldman films. Stardust was great, and Kick-Ass I actually really enjoyed. Like, this is an interesting pen on this movie. What do you think of the script overall?
She's done a lot of work with, I think Matthew Vaughn, maybe everything that Matthew Vaughn has done, she's worked on with him.
Yeah.
I do like what she does here with the script. I think that there, like, we've talked about some of the changes and everything. I think some of it definitely feels like they're changing it for modern audiences to kind of update the mood and tone. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I still think that she did a good job. I actually like the grief story that we have with Radcliffe. That, I think, brought a nice tone already to the film from the start.
Well, to that point exactly. I feel like the grief story is one of the more intriguing elements of the film. Like, it gives a reliably believable backstory to this guy and why he's kind of focused on getting this job done because his livelihood is under threat and he has a child and he's doing it alone with Nanny. Like, it just feels like an appropriate angle for this character. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I think that it works. I think it works nicely. Yeah.
James Watkins, I'm with you. Haven't seen anything else that he's done.
Not very busy as a filmmaker. I mean, this was, although the most recent film that he did, Speak No Evil, which is coming out soon, James McAvoy looks very creepy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very curious to check that one out. Have you seen the trailer for that?
No.
Well, watch it. It looks great. It's a couple goes on holiday in the country and ending up kind of befriending a pair of other people who have a country house nearby, and they kind of come over, and it just gets super creepy from that point forward. It's a Blumhouse film, so
I'll take it.
Yeah.
All right. Cinematography, Tim Maurice Jones, moody, environmental. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think that it works. It fits the vibe. I think that's the tone that they're going for. It is a very dark film, but to that end, I think that it fits. Again, it fits the vibe,
and it really fits the like sinister mold, right? Because we had, it's this whole idea that there is such like fun contrast in this gothic house between light and dark, the things you can see and the things you can't. Like, it's another one of those movies where you feel like if you turn on the house lights, then it's just half walls because everything is so dark in the corners and eerie stuff going on. I really like that. At no point did I believe that they had lit the house with anything other than candles. I thought that was really effective. Knowing, they of course had some incredibly creative lighting. It does feel like candlelight to me. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Moody, good use. I mean, the fog was awesome too. The fog that rolls in around the house and all the way to the very end when they kind of disappear into the fog on the train station.
Well, that's, movies with fog, I really enjoy the way that you can play with that. And there was a fun moment in here where you've got a shot of Arthur as he's hearing these sounds in the fog of this child, like the carriage crash into the mud and everyone screaming and dying and everything. You hear all of that and you see him in the fog looking, and then we cut to what we think is a POV as he's kind of looking out into the fog trying to see anything, and suddenly he comes running forward into the fog, like past the camera, and we're like, oh, like I thought I was seeing his point of view, but no, it was just another shot. So the way you can really play with that, I think, really kind of makes you very uneasy.
I think if anybody who's listening to the show knows you have a list of your favorite M's in composers, I'm sure Marco Beltrami's at the top of it, right? Favorite M's. Have we talked about that before? I'm sure maybe that's new.
It might be new. I don't have any favorite M's, but Marco Beltrami is, I think he's a very effective composer for films like this. Like he's done some good music in a variety of projects.
Arguably the best thing about the movie Silent Night. Rough sailing.
Oh dear. Yeah.
Yes, he's done a lot of great stuff. I mean, man, 149 credits.
A lot of interesting genre film.
Totally.
Stuff, yeah.
What else you got? Anything hot you want to talk about as we wrap up?
I think that's about it.
That's all I got.
All right. Well, we will be right back, but first our credits.
The Next Reel is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson, music by Muted, Oriole Novella, and Eli Catlin. Andy usually finds all the stats for the awards and numbers at the-numbers.com, boxofficemojo.com, imdb.com, and wikipedia.org. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please, please, please consider doing that for our show. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. All right, I feel like we've been talking about sequels and remakes and prequels and postmakes for a while. But what do we have to learn that we might have missed?
I mean, the book came out in
1983?
Yeah, early 80s. Then the TV movie came out in 1989. There was a BBC radio broadcast of it in 93 and another one in 2004. In 2012, there was this film. There was also a stage play of it that ran at the West End, and it was the second longest running play in the history of the West End after The Mousetrap. So very, very popular stage play over there. And this is like how prominent the book is in British society. The book is commonly used as set text in British schools as part of the national curriculum for English. It's recommended for Key Stage 3 and above, with the paperback edition most frequently used by students. The novel is the subject of GCSE English literature questions from the Edexcel and Edequas examination boards.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Is it like a British Grapes of Wrath? Like,
yeah.
I find that to be very interesting.
Me too.
Last but not least, there was a sequel to the book and novelization of the script for the second movie, The Woman in Black, Angel of Death, written by Martin Waits. It was published in 2013 and the US 2014, and then, of course, made into the 2015 film, The Woman in Black, Angel of Death. Did you end up watching the sequel?
I did not. Did you?
I did. It's kind of frustrating. It's not great, but they do some interesting things with it. It shifts forward into World War II, and now we have a woman who cares for kids. Several of them take a group of kids from London, where it's being bombed, into the countryside to this house to take care of the kids. And of course, they're in this house where a woman wants to kill kids. And so there are elements that are interesting and that work throughout the film, but there are a lot of things that don't work, and that's what's frustrating, because it's like, gosh, I feel like you were on the verge of doing something really interesting with it, and unfortunately it just kind of stumbled. And that's even more frustrating because Susan Hill, the original author, actually was involved in crafting this story.
Ooh.
And so yeah, it's kind of frustrating, but there is interesting stuff in it, and that's why I kind of feel like it's at least worth a watch, because I do think that there's just an interesting element of the whole angle they took.
It didn't break things like Sinister 2.
No, well, other than the fact that the Woman in Black is still hanging out at the house. I mean, we kind of know she was still around at the end of the first film. She's still here and she's still killing people, and yeah.
Okay. Well, but did it do any good at the awards season?
Yeah, it had 5 wins with 14 other nominations. At the Saturn Awards, it was nominated for Best Horror or Thriller Film, but lost to The Cabin in the Woods. At the Empire Awards, it won Best Horror Film and was nominated for Best British Film, but lost to Sightseers. And then, of course, the reason we're here, the Fangoria Chainsaw Awards. It was nominated for Best Wide Release Film, but again lost to The Cabin in the Woods. Daniel Radcliffe, nominated for Best Actor, but lost to Liam Neeson in The Grey. And the score, you mentioned Marco Beltrami's score. It was nominated for Best Score, but lost to that creepy stuff going on in Sinister. So now we've come to the end of this series. We've talked about these 5 films. We talked about The Grey. We talked about Kill List. We talked about Sinister, Sleep Tight, and now The Woman in Black.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on the Fangoria Chainsaw Awards nominees for Best Actor?
Man. I feel like it's a tough one. I liked Sleep Tight a lot, right? And I liked Sinister a lot. I think Ethan Hawke is an easy win for me, as a charismatic actor in this particular role. I think I probably land on Neeson in terms of the overall challenge that as an actor that he had for this movie, as the challenge that he had communicating the emotional journey from being completely lost at the beginning of the movie to being found at the end, even as he goes into a losing fight with nature. I think he just nails it for me. So this is a harder one because I found something to really like in all the movies that we watched. Like I think there's something really great in all of them, but The Grey stands out for me.
Yeah, and it's my favorite film of the list. I think Liam Neeson was just so he carried that sense of grief in the film, and then was able to kind of turn that into that strength that I found so fascinating as a character in the film. So it's hard to see a different angle for me, but
mm-hmm.
I mean, there were some really interesting performances on here outside of that. I kind of am torn. Like, if I were to say what would be, if I took Liam Neeson out, where would I land? And I'm really torn between our lead actors for Kill List, Neil Mescal and Luis Tosar in Sleep Tight. Like, I'm kind of torn between those two as my next choice.
Yeah, for me, I guess I think it would be Sleep Tight if that's the choice. But I have to say, this was a series of surprises for me because so many of the movies I hadn't seen. And what a huge relief that I don't feel like there's any movie on this list that is not recommendable.
Yeah, no, I think they're all fun films, creepy films. I'm not going to recommend them to just people blindly. I mean, it's definitely going to be
I've already
somebody...
recommended all of them to your mother.
That would be interesting to see where she would go with this list. But yeah,
next week, your mom and my mom will be hosting the podcast.
But they'll be talking about these 5 films all over again. Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, it's a fun list of films, and I do enjoy the performances. Like I didn't think there was a bad performance in the bunch.
No, for sure.
All right.
Awesome. All right, how to do at the box office? Does it make any money?
Watkins had $32 million to make his Ghost Story, which is $44.1 million in today's dollars. The movie opened February 3rd, 2012, opposite Chronicle, Big Miracle, and, as we discussed a few episodes ago, the very limited release of Kill List. This landed in the number 2 spot behind Chronicle and went on to earn $54 million domestically and $74 million internationally for a total gross of $128.9 million in today's dollars. All told, the film landed with an adjusted profit per finished minute of $1.4 million, making it the most successful of this series in adjusted profits per finished minute. But Sleep Tight is actually the winner when it comes to the profit-to-cost ratio.
Boom. That's where the money's at.
There you go.
All right.
Yeah. Fun film. Fun film list. I'm glad we got some horror on here and looking at actors. And I had a great time. And I definitely enjoyed this film. I mean, it's a fun, creepy one.
Yeah, me too, for sure. Again, for mood alone, this film really excels. And so that lets us into our next series.
Yes, I can't believe it. We'll be right back for our ratings. But first, here's the trailer for next week's movie, kicking off our final series of this season, looking at the 2023 DGA Awards for Outstanding Directorial Achievement in a Theatrical Feature Film nominees, Martin McDonagh's The Banshees of Inisherin.
Call him Sonny Larry. Didn't you and he used to be the best of friends?
We're still the best of friends.
No, you're not.
Who says we're not?
Sit somewhere else.
Now, if I've done something to you, just tell me what I've done to you.
But you didn't do anything to me. I just don't like you no more.
You didn't like me yesterday.
Why does he not want to be friends with you no more? What is he, 12?
What the hell's going on with you, me feckin' brother?
He's dull, Siobhan.
But he's always been done.
The other night, 2 hours you spent talking to me about the things you found in your little donkey shite that day.
Well, it wasn't me little donkey's shite. It was me pony's shite, which shows how much you were listening.
If you don't stop talking to me...
Colin!
And if you don't stop bothering me, I have a set of shears at home. And each time you bother me from this day on, I'll take those shears and I'll take one of my fingers off with them. And I'll give that finger to you until I have no fingers left. Does this make things clearer to you?
Not really, no.
Starting from now. But shush like, Polly. You know, shush like.
Yeah, I'd shush like. Would you not want him to have to do the one finger to see if he was bluffing, like?
No, we wouldn't.
Because worse comes to worse, he can still play the fiddle with 4 fingers, I bet ya.
Going back to your own gang now, Polly.
And talking to me! Are you?
Why aren't you talking to Porrick no more?
That wouldn't be a sin now, would it, Father?
No, but it's not very nice either, is it?
Do you know who we remember for how nice they was in the 17th century?
Who?
Absolutely no one. Yet we all remember the music of the time. Everyone to a man knows Mozart's name.
I don't, so there goes that theory.
Can't be waiting around for any more of this madness.
Let's just call it quits.
We won't call it quits. We'll call it the start.
It is hard to believe we've been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
You're telling me producing this show week after week is so much fun, but it does require a lot of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
The originals page at thenextreel.com/originals links to the source material for all of our adapted film discussions. Purchasing through our links supports the show.
In Season 13, we explore various awards categories and the films nominated in them.
We wrapped up our 1940 Best Picture series with adaptations of Mice and Men from John Steinbeck and Wuthering Heights from Emily Bronte's novel, not to mention the play Dark Victory by George Brewer Jr. and Bertram Bloch.
The 1947 Academy Award adapted screenplay series featured Anna and the King of Siam, based on Margaret Langdon's book, plus The Best Years of Our Lives, Brief Encounter, and The Killers.
The 1952 cinematography nominees included Death of a Salesman and A Streetcar Named Desire, A Place in the Sun, based on both a play and a book, and Strangers on a Train, based on Patricia Highsmith's first novel.
So many great movies based on books and plays, like Beckett, The Pumpkin Eater,
A Boy and His Dog, Rollerball,
The Princess Bride, Congo, The Scarlet Letter,
Jackie Brown, The Deep End, The Gray, The Woman in Black,
and Top Gun Maverick, which I'm very much looking forward to revisiting.
Get the source books at thenextreel.com/originals.
Start your next read or reread from the movies we've covered. Visit thenextreel.com/originals today. I have talked to a number of people in just social circles, and when I tell them that we're about to do this next set of movies, they say they absolutely hated the Banshees of Inisherin, more than one person.
Wow.
And I find that so disappointing.
I feel like Martin McDonagh has a lot of people like that.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like Three Billboards gets a lot of hate.
I love Three Billboards.
Yeah.
Dang it. All right.
Strange thing, yeah.
Letterboxd Andy, what are you going to do for this movie? Good vibe equal good star?
I definitely enjoy the film. It's creepy. It's, I think there are ways it could have been better, but I do think that they make an effective ghost story film here. I'm going to say 3.5 stars and a heart.
I'm stuck on 3 or 4 stars. I think it's a 3-star and a heart for me. I think that's where ultimately I ended up. It is a good, competent film, and it heavies up on some tropes in some of the more intense kind of Act 2 to Act 3 sequences. And I wish there were more bigger events, horror events. But overall, a really good film.
We didn't talk about it, but I gotta say, I really enjoy in this film the way that they play with darkness and shadows, and how sometimes you think that there's like a shadow behind Radcliffe, and then suddenly it moves and you realize, oh, that's the woman in black back there. The one that I thought was actually the best, and they didn't do it as a jump scare. It was so, like, this is what I wanted all the time. When he goes down to the cemetery and there's a tracking shot as the camera's tracking right to left through the trees and just kind of the muck and everything else in this kind of ratty old forest as he kind of walks down there. And the whole foreground is out of focus. And then suddenly it passes her.
Yeah.
And
I loved that.
And we settle with just like a piece of her veil kind of on the right side of the frame. But
yeah.
And the music does something. It's like a very soft, like tone shift there. That was so effective. Like, they had moments like that throughout the film that I just cheered for, because like that's what I was excited about, seeing those little moments that showed that they were developing kind of those ghostly elements in the film very effectively.
And that the ghost is always there, right? I think that's where those are useful. There's another one where he kind of starts falling asleep at the table and the door opens behind him way across the hall and she approaches him and then it changes to her POV behind his head. I thought that was very effective. Like, that could have come off as kind of a campy choice, but I thought it was very, very effective.
Yeah, and so I guess when we say jump scares, like, they did a lot of stuff that wasn't jump scares that was actually more effective. It almost makes me want to bump my rating up.
More of that.
Almost wants me to bump my rating up a half point, but I'm not going to.
All right.
Leave it at 3.5. All right. Well, we can find our ratings over at thenextreel.com, where this is going to be at 3.25, so we'll round that up to 3.5 and a heart. You can find me there at Soda Creek Film. You can find Pete there at Pete Wright. So what did you think about The Woman in Black? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Hop into the Show Talk channel over in our Discord community, where we will be talking about the movie this week.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Letterboxd giveth Andrew.
As Letterboxd always doeth.
Okay, I have a short one that has trivia.
Oh.
That I think you of all people might find interesting.
Okay.
3.5 stars from Nakul. James Watkins' The Woman in Black was better than I expected. Quite an underrated and old-school gothic horror movie. It's very familiar and follows a lot of typical horror tricks, but it's effectively made and beautifully composed, and everything about the ambiance and mood feels rich with chilling atmosphere and mounting tension. Also, I just found out that in the 1989 version, Arthur was played by Adrian Rollins, the actor who played James Potter.
Oh. That's funny. I would not have pulled that.
Yes.
That's genius.
I think that's really interesting. That is a funny bit of weird stunt casting. The review that follows it immediately after is from Mikkel Strangren, who says, "That's not the train to Hogwarts, Harry," which I also think is very funny.
Yeah, had I just clicked on him after I watched the movie, I didn't click on the actor, but yeah, I see that now. He sure is James Potter.
Isn't that funny?
That is awesome. What an odd little connection there, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I went with a review that I decided I'm going to sort by earliest review. I picked the very first review on Letterboxd of this film, January 13th, 2012. So Mark Wassmer, 4 stars with a heart, must have seen it at a preview screening or as a critic or something. The Woman in Black is very rich in style with its muted color palettes, misty landscapes, and blue-wash moonlight scenarios. It's very much a modern-day throwback to the style of the Hammer horror movies from the 1950s. I'm pretty sure those deer antler chandeliers were a nod to the old horror films where they were compulsory in every creepy house on a hill. As you would expect, being a horror movie, the film is dark, beautifully dark, in fact, not in the sense that you can't see what's happening on screen, no, dark in a very foreboding, atmospheric, somebody lurking over your shoulder type of way. Scenes are framed as such that you can't help but scan the screen, looking in the background to make sure you're not missing something. The lighting is perfect, just enough to capture the environment whilst leaving those dark corners intact where anything could happen. The sound is amazing, perfectly capturing the moment of a creaking floorboard, a whisper of the wind, and bringing with it tension, suspense, and the threat of something scary. And when the big scares come, they come with audible vengeance. When watching The Woman in Black, I was reminded of those videos you find on video sharing websites, the ones that your friends send you to and tell you to concentrate on a task. So you do, and then after a while, something jumps up on screen and scares the bejesus out of you. Well, that's what this movie is like. Once the film has established its direction, the fun begins. Slowly at first, but eventually it becomes relentless just when your heart is settled. Bang, here's another and another. In one word, scary. Radcliffe as Arthur Kipps was brilliant and carried the film with ease. There you go.
I like it. I love the vibe of you're focusing on a task and all of a sudden something jumps up at you. It's the entire vibe of this movie. Yeah. He just wants to get some legaling done.
I just want to do my legal paperwork. Why does this ghost have to keep mucking it up?
Thank you so much, Letterboxd. The ghost of Letterboxd. I've been podcasting since 2006. In that time, I've tried countless hosting platforms, but in August 2022, we switched to Transistor to power all of our shows here at True Story FM, and it's been a game changer.
I love the Transistor allows unlimited podcasts and storage without extra charges. We can publish so much content, and we do. If you want to start up a podcast, do yourself a favor and host your show on Transistor.
With their one-click publishing, you can get your new show onto all the major podcast directories effortlessly.
And their website builder lets you quickly build custom sites for each show.
The detailed analytics are invaluable too. You can access all kinds of listener data anytime.
Oh, and the versatile players allow you to embed episodes anywhere to reach new listeners. Plus, the team behind Transistor is super responsive and keeps making the platform even better.
After using countless hosting services over 15 plus years, Transistor has been, hands down, the best podcast partner for us.
If you want a hosting platform to take all the worry out of getting your podcast out into the world, go to thenextreel.com/transistor and check it out.
Support our show and support your own show by going to thenextreel.com/transistor. Start growing your podcast today.